Welcome everybody. We are here at last. We want to thank you again to all of you for your patience as we work through these technical difficulties. But we are here, so thanks for hanging in and thanks for being with us today. My name is Brenton Jensen. I am one of the counselors here in Enrollment Services, and I'll be leading you through our presentation. As you guys have already experienced, we've got a bunch of amazing people hanging out on our chat, answering your questions. Feel free as we go through the presentation to continue to send those questions. We'll get to them the best we can. And we'll have a short little question part at the end if it's needed. We can answer some questions there as well. We'll just remind you again, make sure in the chat that you're not posting any personal details, IDs, social security numbers, money amounts, things like that, since it is a public chat. Basically, we're going to give a 15-minute presentation, more or less, try to give you some basics about the FAFSA, some common questions that we get on the FAFSA to help you learn it, help you navigate it, and hopefully this will help you out. So a lot of times, one of the big questions that we get is, why should I even fill out the FAFSA? A lot of students don't bother filling it out just because they think their parents make too much money to qualify for federal aid, or they're looking at it as student loans. I don't want to go into debt for college, things like that. We still feel like it is important that each student fill out the FAFSA every school year. You never know when or if your financial circumstances could change. As we've all learned the past couple of years, things change quickly and crazily. So you never know. Regardless of whether you end up coming to BYU or wherever, we recommend filling it out. The process really doesn't need to be too intimidating. We're here to walk you through it. We're here to help. And there are some other things as you fill out the FAFSA, even if you don't end up eligible for federal aid, that you can still be eligible for and apply to with your FAFSA. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. We get asked a lot, what do I qualify for with the FAFSA? So there's a few different things through the FAFSA itself that you could potentially qualify for. There's the Pell grants. That's the free money. That's, acts kind of as a scholarship from the government that they're giving to you to help you go through school. You could also possibly qualify for federal loans. So those come in two different types, subsidized and unsubsidized. Both work basically the same way. The big difference is that the subsidized loans do not accrue interest while your loans are in deferment and you're in school, whereas the unsubsidized loans do. Specifically for BYU, filling out your FAFSA, you could qualify for BYU scholarships and our Cougar Pell promise. So by filling out the FAFSA and submitting the BYU scholarship application, you could qualify for a number of different things like this, including one of our newer programs that we're going to talk a little bit more about now, which is our Cougar Pell Promise. Cougar Pell Promise is a last dollar commitment that we as a university give for 8 semesters to qualifying students. Basically what it is that you're guaranteed that any remaining undergraduate Latter-day Saint tuition charges will be covered for 8 semesters after grants, scholarships, and other benefits are received. So in order to qualify, you must be admitted to BYU as a freshman student by the first fall semester after high school graduation. You must complete the online scholarship application by the published scholarship deadline, which we'll cover again here in a minute. And then you must complete the FAFSA and be certified as Pell eligible. And the deadline for that for this year is January 20th. So that's Cougar Pell Promise in a nutshell. A little bit about what you need to do in order to be considered for that. Next question, who can qualify for federal financial aid? So there are some specific things that you need to be or to have in order to qualify for federal financial aid. You do need to have a social security number. Keep in mind though that you do have to have a social security number, but your parents do not need to have one in order for you to submit the FAFSA. As of right now, U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens can qualify for federal financial aid. such as permanent residents. At this time, international students and DACA students do not qualify for federal aid. You also do need to have a high school diploma or recognized equivalent, so that could come in the form of a GED, completing a high school program approved under state law, those kinds of things. And then you will also need to meet certain requirements, such as what we call satisfactory academic progress. Basically, there are certain standards set by the university regarding your GPA, number of credits you're taking, and the rate at which you're passing your classes that will be monitored as far as looking at your eligibility for federal aid. This is where we're going to get to our first swag giveaway, but again, thank you all for your patience. We're going to go ahead and just send you all that swag. Make sure you do get your mailing address sent to that email, the Enrollment Services PR at byu.edu that you can see there. We'll make sure that we get you something. Okay, so where do I fill out the FAFSA? So there's a couple of different ways that you can get into the FAFSA. Two main ways. You can log in on your computer at fafsa.gov, or you can also use the My Student Aid app on your phone or tablet. Do be aware, if you ever get a web page that's asking you to pay money to submit your FAFSA, you are on the wrong page. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So you should never be having to pay money to fill out and submit your FAFSA. So that's the two sites that you can go to. You'll log in with your FSA ID. This is basically just your FAFSA username and password that you'll use. And keep in mind, if you're a dependent student, that your parents may need an FSA ID as well, so that they can also sign your FAFSA. Okay, so a couple things to keep in mind as far as your username and password. If you can't remember your FSA ID, you can also try using your phone number or your email address instead. If you still can't remember, you still can't get in, then you can retrieve your username with an email, text, or a challenge question. And if you're having problems with your password, it's easy to reset. Just be aware that if you do recover your password with the challenge question options, you do have to wait for 30 minutes before you can log in. And if you're still having problems, then you can go ahead and contact the FAFSA helpline directly. We've put their number here at the bottom of this slide for you. Okay, so now we're on the FAFSA. We're on the right site. We're logged in. So now we're going to dive into how you actually fill out the FAFSA. So it's important to realize most times when you're getting on the FAFSA website, there's probably going to be two FAFSA applications available to fill out. So obviously you want to make sure you're filling out the right one. So currently the most future FAFSA application that is open is the 2022-2023 FAFSA. Remember that the school year runs from fall through summer. So that 22-23 FAFSA is going to apply for fall 22 as well as winter, spring, and summer of 23. You want to make sure that you're filling out the correct FAFSA and also that you're providing the correct tax information that pertains to that FAFSA. For the 22-23 FAFSA, the government is asking for 2020 tax information. Okay, so when do I need to submit the FAFSA? To be considered for things like need-based scholarships with us, Cougar, Pell, Promise, those kinds of things, you do want to make sure that you submit your FAFSA by January 20th of 22, and then also make sure that your scholarship application is submitted by December 15th, which, as you all know, is our final application deadline. You can submit the 22-23 FAFSA even after school starts, while you're currently in those semesters that the FAFSA applies to, but at that point we will be past consideration for those need-based scholarships, Cougar, Pell, Promise, so you wouldn't be considered for those. At that point you're just looking at what am I eligible for with the federal aid. Okay. So there's just the deadlines again, just to be aware of in order to be considered for those BYU specific aid. Skip that. Okay, so this is a big one. We get this question all the time. When the FAFSA is looking at you for eligibility for federal aid, one of the big things that they're looking at is, are you a dependent student or are you an independent student? Dependency status on the FAFSA is not the same as dependency claimed on taxes. So that's a question that we get asked a lot. Well, I am independent as far as taxes. My parents didn't claim me as a dependent on their taxes. Why is the FAFSA saying I'm dependent? Those two are completely separate. So FAFSA has its own way of looking at you and determining whether they consider you a dependent student. And dependent students do need to include their parents' tax information. If you are dependent, your parents again will need to create their own FAFSA account and sign into your FAFSA at the end in order to get your FAFSA submitted. So what makes a student independent? Here at BYU, there's two top reasons where we see students become independent. That is if you are married and if you're 24 years old or older. So for example, on the 2022-2023 FAFSA, the FAFSA will ask you, were you born before January 1st of 1999? If you can answer yes to that question, you are an independent student. So there is a dependency section there. They're asking you certain questions to help determine, based off their definition, are you independent or dependent, and then it will proceed accordingly. Okay, so in regards to that, now I know, am I independent, am I dependent? So based off of that, who do I include in my household? This can sometimes get a little tricky, so we're gonna walk you through a couple of different scenarios, help you kind of figure out how yours fits into that. So here's one possible scenario. Let's say you are dependent and your parents are married. In that case, when you're looking at household, you're going to be looking at you, your parents, and your siblings. Independent students are going to include themselves and their spouse and children if they have any. Okay, next possible scenario, let's say your parents are divorced or separated. In that case, you're only going to include one of your parents on your FAFSA, and that's the parent who you've lived with the most in the past 12 months, or the parent that has provided you the most financial support in the past 12 months. Okay, and then what if the parent that you listed on the FAFSA was divorced or separated and is currently remarried? In that case, the step-parent tax information should also be included, even if they were not married during the tax year, so for example, 2020. And then also, if the step-parent you included on your FAFSA has children in their home, then you should include those step-siblings as well. You can also include others in there only if your parents provide them 50% of their support. So this could be grandparents, cousins, other family members. If your parents are providing them 50% or more of their support, they will be included in your household as well. One question we get asked about this on the household is, can I count my siblings as attending college if they haven't been accepted anywhere yet? So we encourage you to report siblings in your household that plan on attending college during that aid year. If they don't end up attending college, you can always contact us at Enrollment Services, let us know, and we can help you get that updated. Okay, so in relation to this, we get the question all the time, why do I need to include my parents' tax information on my FAFSA? Basically, the Department of Education has its own definition, again, of what makes a student independent or dependent. And if you're a dependent student, then they do require your parents' tax information included in determining your eligibility for federal aid. If you're determined to be a dependent student, but you feel like you have extenuating circumstances why you may not be able to provide parent information, you're welcome to call one of us counselors and talk with us. In certain extenuating circumstances, we can look at situations if parents are not reachable, you don't even know where they are, unsafe home environment, different things like that. We can look at the possibility of, working with you on that. Okay, in that same vein, why do I need to include my step-parents' tax information? So especially if your parent and step-parent were not married in that year, that tax year that we're asking for on the FAFSA. So FAFSA looks at the financial need of your current household. So since your step-parent is included in the current household, their 2020 income is factored in as well. This also works the same for spouses of independent students. So even if you just barely got married, FAFSA is still going to look at your tax information and theirs from that 2020 tax year. Okay, so now that we know whose tax information we need to provide, we can talk a little bit about providing that tax information. There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. We recommend using the data retrieval tool. Data retrieval tool basically just pulls your tax information directly from the IRS right into your FAFSA so that you don't have to worry about pulling up the papers, entering in the information yourself. Doesn't work for every student or every parent, so if it doesn't, that's fine. You are more than welcome to just get out your tax papers and just fill in the questions accordingly. Okay, after we pass the tax and the income questions, then FAFSA is going to ask us about assets. So depending on the answers that you give in the FAFSA, you or your parents might be asked to report assets. And this again is used in helping to determine your family's financial need and your eligibility for federal aid. So what type of assets are they looking at on the FAFSA? Essentially they're looking at money. So this is anything you have in cash, savings accounts, checking accounts, certain businesses, investment farms, and other investments. Keep in mind these other investments will not include things like the house you live in, 401k, different things like that. Okay, and what about my income information? Dependent students are required to include both their own and their parents' tax information. They both factor into your eligibility for federal student aid. All students need to report any income information regardless of whether you filed taxes or not. This includes if you worked in 2020 but didn't file, in which case they'll just ask about your income but maybe not necessarily your taxes. Okay, that was a lot. Now that you've filled out all of your personal and income information, you're almost done. There's just a couple more important steps that you need to do to make sure that we get your FAFSA on time. Essentially at the end, basically you're just making sure that you are providing an e-signature for your FAFSA stating that the information you have provided is correct. And again, if you're a dependent student, then one of your parents will also need to sign the FAFSA before you submit it. Okay, and once you submitted it, your FAFSA is processed and run through. So what happens next? Okay, so you submit your FAFSA through the FAFSA .gov website or on the My Student Aid. It takes about 3 to 5 business days for your FAFSA to arrive at BYU, and then you will receive a Y message letting you know your eligibility. This Y message will occur shortly after your admission decision. So regardless of when you're actually submitting it, once you're admitted to BYU, you'll receive your admissions notification, and if you're admitted, you'll receive all of your federal and BYU student aid notifications as well. Once you get that notification and you know what you're eligible for, you will also see different tasks show up in your My Financial Center. You'll also receive a Y message about these tasks. Some students are randomly selected for a process called verification, and it's just requiring you to provide documentation for certain things like your citizenship, income, different things like that. So government's basically asking us just to double check and make sure that everything is correct on your FAFSA. Your financial aid, whatever you are eligible for, should be applied to your My Financial Center about 7 to 10 days before classes begin. And then if you have any excess financial aid, then you would be refunded that excess aid, usually beginning on the 3rd day of classes. So this is a picture of your My Aid dashboard. Once you're admitted, this is going to be a great resource for you to keep an eye on the status of your FAFSA. Shows you when it was received, whether you have any outstanding tasks, when your eligibility was determined, and more. You can access that at myaid.byu.edu. If you are a recipient of the Cougar Pell Promise, you'll also have access to another dashboard, and that'll allow you to track your Cougar Pell Promise each semester and see how that is progressing along. So we've talked a decent amount about timeline and when things need to be turned in, so we thought we would just kind of go through this really quick just so that you're aware of kind of the timeline as far as when things need to be turned in. So the 2022-2023 FAFSA was made available on October 1st. That's out, it's open. You can go in whenever you want and get it submitted. Remember, the BYU admissions and scholarship applications are due by December 15th. That is coming up. It's crazy, but we're almost there. So make sure you're getting those completed and in on time. The 2022-2023 FAFSA must be submitted by January 20th for scholarship and Cougar Pell Promise consideration. And then admissions and scholarship decisions will be sent out by February 21st. Okay, and that's pretty much it as far as our presentation. One thing that we want to note just as we finish up that portion, it's a lot of information, and we know it is, and we threw it at you pretty quick. I talk kind of fast sometimes, so if you forget things or if you need further clarification on things, this live stream will be posted here in a little bit, so you're welcome to go back and watch through again for anything you might have missed or forgotten. And of course, you're always welcome to give us a call and let us know any questions that you have at Enrollment Services. We're happy to help. Again, I know earlier and throughout the presentation there were a lot of questions being asked and helped. Do we have any questions right now that we could go over? No?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. Let's just once again remind everyone to send your mailing address to Enrollment Services PR@byu.edu. We want to make sure that we get you some BYU swag for you showing up today. So thanks again for coming.
Yes, thank you so much again for coming. We hope this was helpful, and if you need anything else, feel free to reach out. Thanks.